Hello, I'm Fred Skaggs, retired pastor and marriage and family therapist. Glad to have you today. My subject is the widow's mite, M-I-G-H-T. The text is Mark 12, 41 through 44, or Luke 21, 1 through 4. After what is often called the triumphal entry and the cleansing of the temple by Jesus, he spends some time walking through that temple and is swarmed by people who are upset with him over what he had just done. The chief priests, the scribes, the elders, along with his disciples, have a lot of questions, and Jesus spends time discussing some issues that are important to all of them. He sits down by the treasury. There were 13 boxes shaped like inverted megaphones positioned around the court of women to receive the gifts and donations of worshipers. He watched as people came by to make their offerings. Some people gave a lot, the text says. Then something phenomenal happened, in the opinion of Jesus. A little lady, a poor, the text says, that word means destitute in the Greek language. A poor widow came by to make her offering. It was very small. You apparently could see the coins she put in, as with the rest of them, but Jesus was very impressed with this woman. He said to his disciples, "I tell you the truth. This woman has put more into the treasury than all of the others." Wow. You want to think about that a minute? This passage in both Mark and Luke takes 4 little verses. That's it. But they speak more about faith and faithfulness than anything else Jesus had been saying up to that point. It's hard for some people to think that others can believe in something so strongly that they will give sacrificially to support it. How do you personally measure life? In worldly weights and measures, like dollars and cents, or using spiritual scales of love, service, and friendship? Although we try not to admit it to ourselves, the truth today, more than ever, is that we see our society that judges almost everything according to monetary value. We measure and assume that if something costs a lot, it must be good. If another version cost more, then it must be even better. I was manager of a clothing store in Fort Worth, Texas in 1958. Across the street was a pricey, locally owned department store. The buyer there and I would go together sometimes to the Merchandise Mart in Dallas, where all the clothing manufacturers would bring their new season products. Our store carried a cheaper line generally than the department store, but we did carry some of the better clothing. One day at the Merchandise Mart, I saw the most beautiful brown suit I ever saw, then and now. I bought some for our store, and so did the other buyer. They cost us about $30 a piece back in those days. Now remember, this was 1958. Our store marked them up to $99. The department store marked theirs at $199. One day a fella came in and looked at our stock of suits, saw this one, and commented about how pretty it was. I jerked it off the hanger right quick and tried it on him, and it looked good on him. But he had seen one that looked a lot like it across the street, he said. And he said, that's probably a little better quality. I said, "Sir, it's 100% wool. They don't come in 110%. Well, no matter. He went across the street and bought the same model from the same manufacturer for $100 more. Convinced, I'm sure, that he got a better deal because it was more expensive. Question: whatever happened to the beauty of simple gifts, the dignity of small gestures, the grace to appreciate goodwill and good wishes? What is it with this demand for the grand and ostentatious that we entertain so much today? Supersize and superabundance, in my opinion, make up much of today's standards. Jesus felt that the pittance put into the treasury by a faithful widow was more generous and perhaps more loving than the spilling over riches of the gifts that had already been made before her. Today, consumers demand big bangs for their bucks. Some perk, some freebie should accompany our purchases. I love the BOGO marketing gimmicks stores use today all the time. You charge me twice what you should for the first one, then you give me a free one if I buy the first one. But it works. To be honest with you, I look for them myself. We think we're getting a good deal. But what happens if we use a set of standards not based on monetary values or worldly success ratings to view our behaviors, our values? It's not too hard then to understand that the widow's MITE is the widow's MIGHT of love. David Porter's comment in his book on Mother Teresa is worth listening to. He said, born to Albanian parents, she went to India in 1929 as a member of the Loreto Order of Nuns. There she taught for many years and became mistress of a school. In 1946, she received her call within a call to work with the poorest of the poor. By 1948, she had received permission to leave the Loreto Order and trained in the nursing skills necessary to carry out her calling. She prayed, "O God, if I cannot help these people in their poverty and their suffering, at least let me die with them, close to them, so that I can show them your love." Wasted time and energy? Not hardly. From this simple beginning, the missionaries of charity have grown to include 4,000 sisters and brothers, 755 homes, and 1,369 medical clinics that serve over 120,000 people worldwide. Mother Teresa's might had might, and it's a might of love. That's all she had. Let me tell you about Mrs. Epps. Mrs. Epps liked the time she spent with children as a volunteer at the Norge Elementary School in Williamsburg, Virginia. There she worked with students who had mental and physical disabilities. Her day began long before she went on duty at 7 a.m. She had to catch a bus to get to the school. When she got there, she greeted Drew, who had difficulty walking. Another one of her favorites had Down syndrome. He sat beside her smiling. She'd turn on the tape recorder and play Jingle Bell Rock or some other appropriate song while her students sang and clapped enthusiastically. It took a lot of work with these children all morning long, 5 days a week. She spent her time and her money loving on them. Oh, did I mention that Mrs. Epps was 99 years of age when she did these things? Was she wasting her time? Was that a set of twisted values she had? Was she saying, "I'm too old for this"? She put it this way: I don't want to act dead while I'm still alive. Fanny Epps, Might, M-I-T-E, had M-I-G-H-T, and it was the might of love. Well, she's gone now, but not the love she shared. People have never forgotten Mrs. Epps. Well, let me tell you one more story. When I went to seminary in Texas in 1955, one of my first jobs was as an insurance agent. In that job, I had the privilege of meeting some very special people who impacted my life forever. I met a lady, let's call her Miss Minnie, a widow whose husband in his lifetime had a very meager income, and thus her Social Security was barely enough to take care of her needs. One day after a beautiful visit with her, she said, as I was leaving, "Could I ask a favor of you?" Of course, anything I could do for her was a privilege. She said, "Do you go by ABC Church," and named it, "on your way home?" I said, "Yes, I do. What do you need?" She said, "Could you take this envelope? It's my offering for the month. It's not much, but could you leave it at the church office? I don't have any stamps, and my check won't come until next week." Well, let me tell you, as a result of that request, I did three things. First, I took the check by the church. Secondly, I brought her a roll of stamps. They were 3 cents a piece back in those days. And third, I thanked God every step of the way home that I had been in the presence of one of his choicest saints. Note this, please. Jesus would have said, she gave of all she had. I ask again, how do you measure your life? What scales are you using? What would happen if you began to measure your life by the number of acts of love that filled it? Would you find yourself rich or poor? Recipients of the greatest gift of love ever given, we are truly blessed beyond imagination. And we ought to reflect that in our resources, our attitude toward those less fortunate than we, and our behavior. As I said, Jesus was impressed with this woman. The value of her money was the least amount assigned to any coin of the day, 1/8 of a cent. The King James Version refers to them as mites, the smallest coins in the Roman Empire. As tiny as this pittance was, it is significant that the woman had two, and she gave both. This woman, oh, I wish I knew her name, don't you? She had no power, no pull, no prestige, but she had a heart as big as she was, and she was willing to share it as a part of her faith experience. Could I ask you a personal question? I don't mean to embarrass you, but is Jesus impressed with the acts of love you do with your resources? Is he impressed with mine? That's worth thinking about, because the truth is it'll tell a lot about your life. Amen.